Hello everybody, my name is Ratnos, and welcome to this Mythic Plus Week Analyzed. This week's affixes are Tyrannical, Bursting, Necrotic, and Awakened. This is a nasty, nasty week for pretty much everybody. No matter what level of keys you're doing this week, it is really challenging, and much of the challenge is going to rest on your tank. So when we're looking at the affixes that are active this week, there's kind of two of the pairs that are really, really problematic. So Bursting plus Necrotic, this means that as the pack is reaching its end, your tank has a bunch of stacks of Necrotic, then all of a sudden they're also starting to take huge amounts of damage from Bursting, and they're unhealable because of the Necrotic, so it's very easy for your tank to perish at the end of each pull. In order to play against that, they kind of have to be thinking 10 or 15 seconds ahead and kiting at the end of the pack, even if they aren't in much danger of dying to the pack, because they need to avoid dying to the Necrotic with the Bursting. Necrotic does fall off as soon as you drop combat, so sometimes that can be okay. Sometimes if you kill everything at the same time, there will be enough space for your healer to bomb your tank with some heals, but really it is hugely problematic for any big pull that you're doing this week, and it means that you're going to need to either stop doing those pulls, or if you are going to do those pulls, find a way for your tank to kite at the end of them in order to avoid getting into trouble. So that's problematic affix pairing number one for this week. The other problem is Necrotic and Tyrannical, and this isn't something that's too bad in a dungeon like the Motherlode, but in some dungeons, like in a Tal Dazar, for instance, you have bosses like Volkal here who just hit your tank so often that it's really, really difficult for your tank to drop stacks of Necrotic on this fight without being something like a Brewmaster. Brewmasters are naturally pretty good at just dropping Necrotic because they often just dodge every attack in a few second window, so that can be really useful for, effectively dropping and not gaining your stacks very quickly. But for other tanks, there are a lot of boss fights. I think Volkal is probably one of the worst offenders, though, for ones where you're just going to be looking really hard for a Necrotic reset. This is the kind of thing where a highly skilled tank will see that they have like 5 seconds left on the debuff, and they will immediately charge out to one of the people at range and then leap away again, and they're just trying to do everything they can to drop stacks. You can help your tank out here with something like a DPS player taunting, a healer taunting, and ping-ponging the boss around for a little bit. A player with an immunity combined with a taunt can be really valuable as well. Tracking the exact length of Necrotic that's left on your tank is a really good way to help out with this, but that's hard. That's hard to do, and you kind of need to do this even in lower level keys. Like, even if you're trying to do a weekly 15 key, this can be a boss that can murder your tank. And it's not just Volkal. There are a lot of bosses like this week. So that's kind of the reason that this is a hard week. Ends up making it a really slow week as well. So this is not going to be a week where you're going to see any really high keys timed. Last week we saw the world first plus 30 done actually by a team in the Chinese region. Really, really awesome to see. Next week, week number 4, is going to be another big push week. A lot of teams are going to be putting up plus 30s then. Week 5 will be taking off as well, but then week 6 is also a really big push week. That week is probably the best week on the calendar for really high key pushing. So the fact that 2 of the next 3 weeks are going to be so good means that teams are going to take weeks like this that are bad weeks off. They're going to go get their groceries. They're going to take out the trash. They're going to do the laundry. They're going to make sure that they don't have to do any of those annoying things during the actual push week when they just want to wake up, play video games, maybe go to sleep as the entire set of operations that they do in weeks number 4 and 6. So if you're out there looking for good M+ content on Twitch, it's going to be a bit of a content drought this week, I would guess. You'll see mostly just, people messing around with their friends in 15 through 20 keys, not much higher than that. But it is going to be a good time for key pushing on weeks number 4 and 6. So those are going to be good times to tune in. So I was talking a little bit about which tanks are going to be good this week. I think Brewmaster is definitely one that really is nice for the combination of Necrotic and Tyrannical. That's something where if you're playing with a Brewmaster, you're not going to run into problems in the same way that most of the other tanks are. As far as healers go, there is kind of a clear winner for this week, and that is Holy Paladin. Holy Paladin has the ability to bop off the Necrotic on the tank because it is a physical debuff. Your tank needs to be ready to immediately cancel the bop so that the boss in the trash doesn't just murder somebody else. But if they're spamming a cancel bop keybind, which you can make a macro that does that, /cancel or a Blessing of Protection, then you can safely just bop them to remove stacks of Necrotic, and that can be really, really big. And Paladins have pretty good cooldown healing for big stacks of Bursting. So I think Paladin a pretty clear winner this week. Resto Druid and other stuff is not bad either. Resto Druid has a good way of dealing with Bursting generally, and also can help your tank kite pretty effectively with stuff like Ursul's Vortex and Typhoon. Really, this is a great week to have everybody in your group who can play defense for your tank, play interference for your tank, take whatever they can to do that. So yeah, stuff like Typhoon at the end of the pack, things to just stop your tank from refreshing necrotic stacks when bursting is about to be applied. Really useful from just your entire group. As far as dungeon goes, actually, yeah, Taltazar I think is one of the harder ones, mostly because of how tough the tyrannical necrotic bosses are here. It's actually not just full call. Motherlode, this is the dungeon we were looking at the start of this video. This actually is a pretty good dungeon this week. This one is not one that I'm worried too much about on most tyrannical weeks. And on-death affixes like Sanguine and Bolstering can be really challenging in this area, but bursting actually isn't too bad. There's not really big sets of bursting stacks that you're going to run into here. 4 or 5 stacks of bursting is very survivable, whereas 4 or 5 stacks of bolstering is not as much survivable. So that's why Motherlode is not so bad on bursting, pretty awful on bolstering in this first area here. And yeah, the bosses actually end up being very, very favorable for Necrotic because a lot of them don't really auto attack. And the ones that do take long periods of time to cast stuff in a row. So your tank is really not going to have any problems with stacks in this dungeon. This, I'd say, probably the easiest dungeon this week for, at least in terms of how the affixes impact the dungeon. Motherlode is always kind of a challenging dungeon, technically, to move through. Anyways, those are some of my thoughts about this week. Hope you liked this video. If you did, remember to hit like and subscribe and stuff. I'll be back next week with another one. Check out my Twitch stream in the meantime, twitch.tv/Dratnos. Although I've been streaming a little bit less hard recently. I'm maybe back this week. We'll see. Definitely next week I will be. Anyways, thanks everybody for watching. I'll see you in the next one.